Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to filter in, and then we'll get started. Okay. What an exciting day for us. Welcome to the MFA Design for Social Innovation program at the School of Visual Arts. This panel is filling up quickly. It's exciting to watch. This is our fourth and final panel of our virtual thesis show 2020. Thank you so much to everyone who's participated, and congratulations to the class of 2020. You've shown up and shown us the importance of doing this work to improve our future. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and all of your learnings with everybody in the audience. I'm Mia Osaki. I'm the chair of DSI. I use she, her, hers pronouns. This is an exciting new format for a new time. You can view all of our students' fantastic projects on our website. You can see videos of their work. It's dsi.sva.edu/thesis-2020. So you can learn more about them, and you can see more about what they've done. But today is really about engaging and discussing, and more importantly, acting. We are just cognizant that we're in a new time, and the students felt like they wanted to do something different for these times. And so we're doing a different format. They co-designed these panel discussions together and wanted to engage people within our community and beyond. So we've had some incredible discussions so far. So the format of these panels is we'll do 10 minutes of introductions. There's 25 minutes of discussion amongst the students with our moderator, who's Proctor today. And the students will talk about the theme of this panel and their work and what it means for them. We'll do 10 minutes of Q&A, and you, the audience, are welcome to participate. You can push the Q&A button at the bottom and send over your questions at any time, and we will field as many of those as we can, and then we'll do 5 minutes of closing statements. And so as the last panel today, and before introducing our moderator, who I'm incredibly in awe of, Proctor, I just wanted to share a quick story. When this pandemic started back in early March, we had a graduating class in the middle of their thesis projects. It was almost the close of my first year as chair at DSI. The students were working with communities in the Bronx and Manhattan, Brooklyn, India, China. They were doing work in the field. They were getting ready to walk across the stage to celebrate the 2 years of glorious work that they've done at DSI. And then coronavirus, our work online, and we had to make some tough and very quick decisions. And do it together to ensure that we were meeting everyone's needs. We wanted to make sure that things were accessible, that we were being inclusive in all of our practices moving forward, as the students and the faculty and the staff and everyone at SVA was very clear about. And Proctor, who teaches a very special course in leadership at DSI, called me. I was in the car driving back from closing up the DSI studio. And collecting all of our things before we went online. And I just asked her, Karen, what are we going to do? And Karen said to me in her very clear way, we need to lead this. And it was simple and wise and gave all of us a path to act on this and a way to move forward. So I'm passing along Karen's wisdom to all of you today. We've heard lots of quotes from Karen and the rest of our faculty. And so I know that what these students are learning is making a difference, and it will be what they can share with the world. And there'll be so much more to take away from our panel today. So with that, I'm thrilled to introduce Karen Proctor and all of our graduating students for this panel on accessibility and information exchange.
Thank you, Mia, and I'm thrilled to be here, honored to be here with my colleagues. I am Karen Proctor. I'm the founder and principal of Harbor Workshop, which is a social innovation firm. But most importantly, I am a faculty member for the DSI program. And so I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, and my social design colleagues will introduce themselves.
Thanks, Karen. I am really excited to be here and part of this last panel. My name is Danielle Skinn, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. As a designer, I am both a disruptor and a unifier, committed to knowledge, equity, and artful expression that builds individual agency through finding and revealing our truth, whether that's within our own knowledge base or assumptions about each other. My work practice is centered around creating safe spaces with other people to share and combine talents and passions to innovate for change. Over the past year, I've been honored to work with a group of single adult members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormon Church, as you may commonly know it as, specifically from a congregation in Harlem on the subject of sexuality. We came together in our small New York apartments where people opened up sharing experiences around sexuality and each other's personal beliefs. It became clear that a lack of space and faith-based resources to discover and discuss healthy sexuality made it, being a single member of the Mormon Church, frustrating and conflicting for them. So their shared experiences, although similar, were deeply individual, which created community and collective power within the group. And through that, we co-created Known, a church-sponsored singles-only conference in Manhattan, bringing Mormon singles together, giving them space to absorb information about sexuality at their own level. And the goal really being to open the door to personal journey, opportunity for conversation, and filling in the gaps through educational addresses and small peer-driven discussions.
Thank you, Danielle. My name is Monica Tarriba, and I go by the pronouns of she and her. I'm an internationalist and design strategist with a passion for human rights and gender equity. Through my work, I seek to design towards more equitable and people-first outcomes. I'm from Sinaloa, which is in the North Pacific coast of Mexico, and one of the main economic activities there is agriculture. And I've always been interested in how to better the quality of life of migrant agricultural workers. I wanted to learn more about the educational system in the villages from agricultural companies and the challenges stakeholders involved face in order to provide these kids with the right to quality education. For my thesis project, I partnered with Farmers Best, a fruit and vegetable wholesaler and supplier located in Sinaloa, Mexico. Around 1,200 kids go to school in their villages each year. Farmers Best provides the school infrastructure, and the teachers and the equipment are provided by governmental programs. I focus the research on middle school students aged 12 to 15 years old because this is the age range when school dropout is the highest. For many of them, when they are old enough to work, their dreams have to face reality, and without a clear path that leads them to a different life than the one they know, it is very difficult for them to stay motivated and pursue their dreams. I will share my thesis intervention now. For my thesis intervention, we designed Semillas, seeding change. Semillas means seeds in Spanish, and it is a set of creative motivational tools for middle school students in migrant agricultural communities in Mexico that support, expose, and activate students to create an empowered vision of their future selves. Thank you. I will pass it on to Elana.
Thank you, Monica. So hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today. My name is Elana. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a design researcher, a design strategist, and also a writer. And at my core, I'm a very curious listener, and I'm also a lover of stories. Before I came to DSI, I spent 3 years teaching English in Istanbul and also working with Syrian refugees. While I was there, seeing the refugee crisis and being with Syrians all the time, their resilience and positivity really inspired me, especially in the face of such systematic inequalities. So that experience had me shift my whole career focus and focus on social impact, which led me to my work here today at DSI. So today I focus on community engagement that is both values-driven and power-building.
And I'm Alisha Mahen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a teacher turned design researcher from India, where I taught in underserved communities for 6 years. I owe my identity as a designer to my kids that I taught. They were the ones who pushed me every day to think of how do I make every voice matter in the classroom. And my motivation to empower voices through design brought me to DSI. And after 2 years of self-discovery here, I see myself as a community centered designer working with populations facing inequity and social injustice to reimagine their possibilities. And I worked with my thesis partner, Elana, to design Sisters Can. Sisters Can is a co-created curriculum that guides Yemeni immigrant mothers through their career paths. It uses the power of inter-community storytelling to inform and inspire. We worked with the Yemeni American Merchant Association, or YAMA, which is a grassroots NGO that helps Yemeni immigrants with advocacy and education. Elana and I leveraged our past experiences as teachers and taught YAMA English classes, which allowed us to root this project in co-creation.
Thank you, Alisha. So in working with YAMA, some of our research showed that traditionally Yemeni women are not expected to work, but today that's all changing. But before they can enter the workforce, there are a few challenges that they have to face. So those challenges specifically are lack of access to New York City services, lack of time and space to reflect on their dreams and what they want for their lives, and also a lack of visible and relatable role models who show them that it's possible to both have a career and balance their cultural values. Sisters Can, our project, addresses these challenges by providing stories of Arab Muslim women and how they overcame the challenges in their path. It creates really fun and important conversations on the value of employment and education, and it also gives women the time and space to reflect on their dreams.
Wow, thank you for this impressive images. Hi everyone, I'm Baitian. My pronouns is he, him, his. I'm a designer, come from Northeast China, which is a post-industrial area experiencing transition period. And I grew up in the artist studio, so many of my friends are artists right now. And my target community is the young artists in my hometown, Northeast China. Young artists in Northeast China are facing the problem that hard to get information and resources they need to consistently creating artworks as an artist under the negative influence of the environment. So I hold my thesis project for this problem, Talking to the Blue, which is aimed to help the young artists in Northeast China get these resources required and the information they need. So for solving the problem, I curate 2 combined exhibitions between young artists in Northeast China and artists in New York. I organized a symposium which helped the young artists in Northeast China to understand what is the art and artists looks like in New York and how they work. I wish I could help the young artists communicating with different stakeholders in their circumstances, like all professors or investors, to learn about their issue around them systematically. And for spreading my idea, I go to local public radio station to introduce the exhibition and problem of the young artists in Northeast China, and how this problem looks like, and how this situation looks like in the outside world right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Baitian. 你好，我叫可欣，是一名来自中国的学生。Hi, my name is Kexin from China, she, her, hers. I'm a UX designer, video editor, and music lover. I like making videos, and I've created my own video channel on social media platforms in China for more than 3 years. The contents are mainly about sharing the culture difference between China and US. Also, I love playing drums, and I started to learn percussion music when I was 12. Music is one of the most important parts in my life. At the beginning, I used my native language to introduce myself, since my project is mainly focused on Chinese international students and their language issues. As many people know, in recent years, more and more Chinese students go to US for their study, but the data has shown that almost half of them are struggling with language barrier, even though they have passed TOEFL exam and reached the minimum requirement for school admission. Due to the learning goals and value system are totally different between US and Chinese educational environment, language is still a big challenge for them, especially when the school is not building an inclusive learning space and students cannot get enough resources to improve their English skills. So I'm finding a way to help Chinese international students overcome language barrier and change the current educational space to be more conscious about multiple cultures. That's the purpose of my project. Thank you.
Thank all of you. Well done. Well done. I have just a brief intro to the panels because you can see that there's a lot of different kinds of interventions happening there, and want to sort of set the tone by talking about what connects all of this. So back in 1977, the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Science declared that information has a unique quality as a resource and a commodity, the utility of which in combination with other values is so pervasive as to now result in the now common appellation given to this period of time as the information age. Merriam-Webster defines information age as the modern age in which information has become a commodity, it's quickly and widely disseminated and easily available. Now, this is something that many of us have just accepted. Information is readily available at the click of a button or the swipe of a finger. We have websites and apps of all kinds. We can learn or know something on demand. But that's for privileged classes in our world. Our access to information has become limitless. Through their research and design work, our colleagues that you've just heard from acknowledge that information is vital to quality of life and the ability of people to reach their full potential and to fully access opportunity equity. So the issue is that informational and critical resources are not available to everyone. Accessibility is limited, and they've discovered that information is contextualized, that there are gatekeepers who determine who gets access to information and the kind of information that is actually presented. They've discovered the importance of having appropriate messengers and representation and effective modalities for exchanging information. That's what this conversation is all about. We're going to explore how designing pathways for information exchange enriches lives. So my leadoff question to you all is, how does your project specifically relate to accessibility and information exchange? And I'm going to start with Danielle.
Thanks, Karen. When we came together and grouped our panel on this topic, it just felt so right. In the Mormon Church, sexual identity and literacy has historically been accessible only through the portal of marriage. For Mormon singles in their 20s and 30s, accessing information means wading through the incomplete knowledge of abstinence-only sex ed that they got in their health classes in public school, if that's where they went, fear-based analogies for noncompliance, like being compared to a piece of chewed gum, for example, and a do's and don'ts list taught in their youth church lessons. Singles in Manhattan that I worked with shared themes of shame and guilt, resentment, because they didn't or still don't have the knowledge or language around sexuality to be able to communicate their desires limiting their access to their own agency. Incorporating this natural part of their identity with their faith made them feel at odds with themselves and their own standing in the church. So known is a signal to them to start their journey or continue in their journey to build a healthy sexual identity, showing examples of their peers who have or are incorporating their sexuality with their faith, and that there is support and space to talk about it.
Thank you. Danielle, Monica, what about you? How does this topic fit with what you're doing with Semillas?
Yes, I think my project fits because young students need more resources and tools that will help them take agency for their futures and to know where to access the right information when they need it. Culturally and historically, in rural and indigenous communities, education has not been prioritized, often because the incentives are not in place to encourage families to seek out schooling. For migrant agricultural children, access to information is very limited to what they hear and see in their communities. If they are not receiving the right incentives and encouragement to continue studying from the main role models in their lives, which for most of them are their parents, it is very likely that they won't continue with their education. This intervention is about creating the pathways for young students to understand their own worth and power, and use that power to overcome the difficulties that they may encounter on their educational journey.
Thank you. Now, Kexin, it would seem that information would be readily accessible at SVA, but you found that not to be so. So how does your work, Break the Wall, speak to that and address that?
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting question. And I would see this question as, how does my project break the connections between two worlds? The one is Chinese international students, and another is US universities. So now the situation is there are a lot of resources around students for their English improvement, like videos, online courses, or lectures, but they don't know. They cannot get access to those resources. The school just provide ESL courses for them, but actually the content, the knowledge they learn from that cannot really fit their needs. So my project is working on building the connection between students and the information that can help them improve English skills. That's it.
Thank you. Alisha and Elana, what about Sisters Can? How are you addressing the information around, or the gap between accessibility and information exchange?
So in our initial research, we found out that for Yemeni immigrant mothers in New York, for them to be able to access job opportunities, their identities as Yemeni immigrant mothers bring in specific barriers. Barriers in the form of family support, lack of childcare, culturally appropriate childcare facilities, lack of language. These barriers don't allow them to be able to see the agencies which could actually help them think about how they can plan their career journeys. And also we realized that traditionally the women, there's not been an expectation from the women to work, right? So because of which nobody is really creating that time and space for women to reflect on who do they want to be, what are their dreams, what do they want to be able to achieve. And besides these barriers and lack of time and space, there is one more thing which affects accessibility and information exchange. And Elana is going to talk more about that.
Thank you, Alisha. So as Alisha mentioned, the ability for women to just sit and have conversations about what they want for their futures is really important. And that also leads to the idea of context. So it's often and natural that you best consume information when you receive it in a way that's familiar to you. So in our project, we knew that if the women didn't trust or they didn't relate to the way that they were receiving the information, or the messenger that gave them the information, we knew that the information we give them wouldn't mean anything. So in Sisters Can, we made career information more accessible by providing it in a way that's familiar to their culture, which in our case was intercommunity storytelling.
Thank you. And Baitian, for the young artists in Northeast China, how does your intervention really help them with information exchange?
Thank you, Karen. So as you know, my project is aimed to help my target group get information and resources they need. And for me, information means pattern, but not presence. So accessibility doesn't mean they cannot get information before. I mean, theoretically, everyone can get any information they need right now. In my opinion, accessibility means their awareness on the lack of the information in their environment. And they're willing to increase their accessibility like artists all over the world. And also, I'm trying to building a platform for these artists can interact with artists all over the world. So it can bring a positive influence on their artistic idea. I think that's how I bring information exchange in my project.
Thank you. So as you all know, in our leadership course, we talked a lot about authenticity and our own authenticity. And as social designers, how we need to authentically connect with those that we are working with. So I want to know, Monica, how did you authentically connect and build meaningful relationships with the communities, the young people that you worked with as you designed your intervention?
Yes, thank you, Karen. Great question. For me, it was very important to first build trust with the community. And I did this by being very clear about who I was and what I was trying to do with the valuable information I was receiving. I tried going in person to the school in the villages as many times as I could, because I was based in New York while I was doing my thesis project in Mexico, and this was a very big challenge. I had a lot of support from the Farmers Best team and social workers to make the research and workshops possible. I was moved by the love and dedications teachers and social workers have for this youth and how open and responsive they were throughout the project and intervention.
Now, Elana, you're not a Yemeni woman, but yet you came alongside Yemeni women as part of the design of Sisters Can. So how did you work to build that connection and that proximity?
Yes, Erin, thank you for the question. I think it was really important for both Alisha and I, because neither of us, as you said, belong to the Yemeni community. So we wanted to really work hard to build a relationship that was trusting and beneficial for both of us. So we had a few strategies in how we really solidified this relationship. And the first one was that we democratized decision-making and we co-created in every place possible. So anytime there was a big decision, we always turned back to the community. And second, one thing that was great, as Alisha mentioned, we are ESL teachers, so we got to see them weekly and just create a personal relationship with them and have time to chat casually about their lives and see firsthand. A lot of the students would bring their children to class, so it was a very family environment. We really got to know them. And then last, since with some of our population, our community, we were working with a bit of a language barrier. So that means that we used really fun, creative storytelling tools. So for example, for one assignment, we had them make a dish that they've never made before, and then write down their entire planning process. And so from that, we were able to discuss in the context of their lives what planning and goal setting means to them. So as outsiders, we really did prioritize strong relationships with the community.
Thank you. It's important to remember we're all part of the human family, but these cultural differences really do matter. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because culture is a through line and a thread through all of your interventions. And I'm just curious as to how societal culture actually helped to produce the inequities that you're aiming to address through your interventions. And Baitian, you talk a lot about that in your work. So can you sort of talk a little bit about that societal culture and how that produced some of the inequities that you wanted to address?
First of all, I would prefer to use uneven to replace the inequities in this question. In the culture of Confucianism, the old people always have the superiority position to someone younger than them. Because most of the elite artists are old professors, so in the mindset of most of the public, the requirements of the young artists are kind of unreasonable. And besides, the examination in Chinese culture is very serious. But right now, unlike the math, physics, history, geography, something like this, the art is not one of the necessary subjects. That could provide a kind of bias in the public that art is not useful for the society. And
is it maybe a bit frozen here? So we'll let him catch up.
China. So it's very hard for young artists to have a deep interaction with the gallery system in their daily life. I think that's my answer to this question.
Thank you, Baitian. Danielle, what about you? There's a lot of cultural dynamic that you had to navigate through. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh,
you're
all right. So there is a lot of cultural dynamic to navigate through, and especially in the U.S., Mormon congregations segregate singles and marrieds members, and singles are encouraged to go to these congregations made up of single adults, essentially to find a spouse. And if you don't find someone by a certain age, you're asked to leave and go back to one of those family congregations. And this often leads singles to feel broken and isolated. So, and another aspect to that is that, in a sense, this segregation creates a prejudice and makes it easier for sexuality to not be addressed in that community. But then it gets more complex too, because those singles congregations also provide community to them, and it builds strength between them as a group. So it's an interesting place to try and navigate through.
And you did, so you did. I appreciate the difficulty of that. And Kexin, you had to navigate multiple cultures. So there's the culture of the academy, the School of Visual Arts, but then there's also the culture coming from the international students. So what did you notice in terms of how the culture of the academy was actually producing some inequities that you really wanted to address in your work?
Yeah, well, for my project, I would say it's really the question that if the US universities are inclusive or not. So according to my research, I found that many schools actually, they don't provide an inclusive learning space for international students, and students also cannot feel that they are valued and respected in the class. The language barrier is a huge problem for them to express emotions and personal opinions. So my project aims to bridge this gap that exists within the culture of school, and also empower the international students to give them more confidence to communicate with local English speakers. Yeah.
So the other thing that you learn a lot about at DSI is systems. And there are systemic issues. So some of the things that Kexin is talking about are academy systemic issues. And I'm wondering how your interventions address some of the actual systemic issues that produce the challenges that you designed for. So we talked about societal issues and whatnot, but what about some of the systemic issues? So Alisha, how did you address that?
That's a beautiful question. And I will speak about two systemic issues that Sisters can address. Firstly, social systems give the impression that only one kind of narrative is favored. As a result, people associate only that narrative with that system. So for example, with respect to workforce development, in New York City, to get most jobs, you need English. So hence the women feel that without knowing English, they cannot do anything, right? Mm-hmm. So what the system is not telling the women is that, you know what, you can still make money or do other things without knowing English. And hence it became super, super important for Sister Skinn to show a diversity of stories, show stories of role models who have been able to navigate the system, right? It was about telling more stories to break that single narrative of the system. And secondly, the current social system in the US make it really hard for Muslim immigrant women to access opportunities. They face discrimination in the form of xenophobia, Islamophobia, sexism, right? And hence, Sister Skinn wanted to be able to create that space for women to have an exchange of ideas. Now here, we are having an exchange of ideas in two places, not only from the role models, but also within the sisters to talk about these really, really important issues that they are going to be facing. So yeah, this is how we feel that like Sister Skinn is addressing systematic issues.
Yes.
That's incredible. That's powerful. Monica, you're dealing with systems issues. You have an education system, and you also have a migrant education system. So there's layered systems in which Semillas is trying to intervene on behalf of. So how did your intervention work toward that and addressing the systems change?
Yes, that's a great question. I think that having access to social and emotional learning tools, exposure to role models, and creative problem-solving activities will empower these kids to make more life-affirming decisions that will lead them to access better social and economic opportunities for them and for their families. This intervention will create the beginning of a path for students to achieve higher education and consequently have more agency on their life decisions. If youth can understand and communicate what they want for their futures, their path of how to get there will become clearer for them and for the people around them. And I think for this, this is how the systemic issue will start being addressed by empowering them.
Thank you. I want to, I'm watching the time, and I want to be mindful of, we're eager to know what outcomes you're anticipating. And I know we don't know what the outcomes are until things are fully implemented, but I want to know what outcomes you're actually anticipating with your interventions. So starting again with Alisha, and what outcomes do you anticipate for your work?
So our goal with Sister Skinn was to be able to empower the women with information to begin their career journeys, but also to make them the catalysts of change within their community. I remember this one time we spoke to one of the role models who was a hairstylist, and she says, you know what, women come to me and they come and tell us that I have no skill. And within the 5 minutes that I'm giving them the haircut, I am able to make them realize that no, you are good at something, you do have skill. What she told us was that women need that space to be able to just think, and they need to believe in themselves. That's what Sister Skinn wants to do. It wants to create that space for women to just sit, reflect, and plan to how to achieve their goals and dreams.
Thank you. That is important. And Danielle, what outcomes are you hoping for with your work?
So I got a glimpse of what we do hope for with the conference from the groups that we met in together. For those that came, and we had these discussions about sexuality together, 100% of them felt like they found community in those discussions, and that they learned about different points of view about sexuality, and also found hope in being able to collaborate to make something happen and make change happen. So with Known, the goal is to be able to restore that agency, to help them feel confident to gather whatever information they need about sexuality and to incorporate that into their identity, and increase trust in themselves and in their choices.
And that goes to the quality of life that we talked about earlier. Baitian, what outcomes are you anticipating with your intervention?
Well, the result I anticipated, I hope that young artists can get systematical understanding of their environment. I hope young artists can be more willing to gather information and keep their mind open. I hope young artists not in China can be more confident on expressing their artistic idea. That's it.
Okay. And Monica, what about you?
Yes. For me, one of the most eye-opening moments was with the invited speaker for my thesis intervention. Ricardo Pedro from Oaxaca, Mexico, is the first indigenous to graduate from MIT, and now he holds a PhD from the same university. Ricardo came to share his story with the students about his experiences coming from an indigenous background and now holds a PhD. He talked about the joy and fulfillment that comes from what he has accomplished, but also about the hardships he faced when he ran out of money to continue studying, or when he faced discrimination because of his origins or color of his skin. Students were very moved by his testimonials and kept asking questions. And I think the most important learning is that through Ricardo's story, these students will connect with their own dreams and motivations that will encourage them to continue studying.
That's beautiful. And Kexin, you're breaking down the wall. So what do you hope will be the long-term outcomes of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to let Chinese students understand how the US education system works. What's the difference between Chinese and the US learning environment? And second, I hope my project can empower Chinese international students to practice English and develop their confidence and motivation to participate in the US educational environment. So for the higher level, I hope it can change the current educational space in the US university to be more inclusive and conscious about multiple cultures. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, we all had that pandemic moment as we entered into this time. I wonder how you thought about your work in the context of the pandemic. So, Elana, how do you feel that the work is validated, and in terms of the pandemic? This is our opportunity. So what as sisters can lend to that?
Yes, Karen, thank you. I think it's a really important question. I think you pointed out in our class that our work doesn't mean anything if it can't adapt to a time like this when it's so needed. So I think that the pandemic, it's changed everything, but it's also provided a lot of clarity on how inequitable our culture is and how we really need programs like all of the ones on the panel today to really help marginalized groups. So specifically in terms of our project, the pandemic era has affected a few things that are incorporated in our project. So that's gathering, the ability to gather, the ability to access information, and also entering the workforce. It's become much more difficult for everyone, and especially for already marginalized groups like Yemeni immigrant women. So Sisters Can, even as a virtual course, offers help with all of those things. Alisha and I were really excited because we were lucky enough to run the course online. And despite the frustrations of the pandemic, the women showed up to class super eager to learn. We had a class on family support, and the women were so lively. They were joking with each other, trading advice. It was a real magical conversation to witness, especially in such a time of separation. And I think also now more than ever, community need to build their social capital, and the women need strategic plans on how they're really going to enter this struggling job market, which Sisters Can also helps them build. So even while the pandemic is increasing isolation and prohibiting information exchange, Sisters Can creates a space for women to learn from each other and just to work together.
Thank you, Elana. Mia, so I think we're ready for questions if you want to take it over.
Okay. Starting from the top, Mark Reddick, who's our wonderful instructor for the Foundations of Design for Social Innovation, asks, for any of all the participants, can you say a little bit about the messy part of your process? How many things did you explore before settling on the final form of your work? How did you come to believe that this was the thing to invest your efforts in? Big question, but everyone loves the messy part. How'd you get here?
I can take a stab at that. So this is a process of building trust with this group. I mean, I came in knowing some of these people, and but I didn't know some of them, and so, and especially on such a sensitive topic, it really took some time to try and figure out what needs were, especially because their experiences were and are so individual, and especially because they fit into so many different backgrounds, and so the messy part of this was trying to figure out what they really wanted and what they felt like was really going to make a difference and an impact, and also coordinating that with leadership in the LDS Church, which was, we had a good surprising outcome from that. There was interest in pursuing doing the conference, and so, but then also with the pandemic, it's changed it. We had to put things on hold, but then that also gave us the opportunity to refocus and to reorient our approach. And so the whole thing is messy, but it allows it to become what it really wants to become.
Go ahead, Baitian.
I can answer this question. So for me, the messy part is nearly every different group of people during my process with my intervention or prototype have different contexts. Like, for example, the meaning of the art or contemporary art and many vocabulary, they have different meaning between North China and New York. And some young artists have a strong negative emotion on their professions. And also, I'm pretty sure like some language we're using right now in English here will be kind of offensively in their context, and some of the language they use will be very offensively in the context in New York. So I think that is something especially important we should take care during the cultural exchange, like how to make the different group with different ethic or context cooperation together with the skill of the language, understand different contexts, and select the language we're using during this process carefully.
Great. There's another question from Taylor, who was one of our graduates of DSI. How did you balance your own personal interests, identities, and experiences with your role as the designer and facilitator? What challenges did you face with confronting your own biases?
I would love to start on that. I feel like this was something so important for both me and Elana, that we do not belong to the communities where we don't have as many shared identities. And I think that's why we had to make one of our principles throughout the process that the community has to be the driver of the entire process. We had to ensure that we have to turn from designers into facilitators of the process, and they and the community to really become our co-creators, like through decision making at every single stage. And an important part of that for us was to be extremely transparent with them, like being transparent about every nitty gritty to be able to build that relationship and keep our assumptions in checks throughout. Elana, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
Yeah, so as Alisha said, we were really cognizant of this the whole time. And so I think one thing that we did was we always presented our research with them, and we always went through decision-making, like structured decision-making activities with them, with stakeholders like Yama leaders, with women who represented our target population, and with community leaders as well. So we definitely believe that inclusivity builds quality. So in trying to confront our own biases, we tried to bring as many voices from the Yemeni community as possible.
Yes, for me, this was very challenging because of the distance, but like I always like try challenging my assumptions. Like if I was thinking something that I was not sure, like I will contact social workers or the teachers, and most of the times find that my assumption was wrong. So always question your assumptions. And I think that's it for me. That was the biggest takeaway.
Great. There's two questions in here I think that are really great, and I would love also, Karen, you feel free to respond to working with the students. One is it's about what you're going to do with your thesis, and one says, do you see yourself working on your projects beyond the scope of thesis, quote unquote? To what point do you feel your projects and your involvement in some way before they self-sustain? And the related questions, how did you leave the partners that you co-created or co-designed with? To what extent was continuation or afterlife of your project or work designed for? So it's looking at how do we sustain this?
Yes, for me, this is just the start of a process. I will continue to work with this community, and I will still this was the first intervention, but still I got a lot of feedback, and we need to iterate and make the next intervention better. So yes, in my case, I think this is the reason I'm here in my hometown, to continue working with this community.
Something that emerged at the end of this process with this group, especially as the pandemic set in, was a reevaluation of where we were going, and also then it just organically came out that setting a vision and a mission and values and goals for what the conference could be through strategic other strategic channels really is going to help to guide where we going forward with this.
All right, so Danielle, you did it. You triggered the question of all questions. Because you talked about values and whatnot. So you know what I'm going to ask you and others. And that it would not be me, it would not be the moment if I did not say that leadership truly matters in all of this. And so what I want to know is how you all have integrated and will continue to integrate the leadership principles that you've identified and honed into your work and into your life going forward. Anyone can answer that.
I'd love to speak about this one because Karen, your class was really, really special to me, and Alisha and I definitely talked about it a lot, how we could take those learnings into our project. So for me, from your class, I learned that leadership is about being congruent and authentic, or just living your values, as you said. So we tried really hard to be intentional in our values so that they're not just like a list of beautiful words that sit in our documents between me and Alisha, but they're really something that we live by. So for example, for this project, representation and equity were incredibly important because we are not part of the community and because it's a marginalized group. So we used a community-based participatory research approach, which is basically just equitably involving all members of the community in research and decision making. So for us, leadership was really about finding practical ways to make our values come to life.
For me to just add to that, for inspiring leadership, I truly believe it's about two things. It's about decentralizing decision making and building the capacity of people to solve problems. In Sister Scan, we incorporated the first by involving multiple stakeholders at every stage. And for the second, we designed the project to ensure that the women gain the capacity to be able to actively achieve their dreams independent of systems around them. All these elements contribute, according to me, to developing the ownership for the community, and which enhances the sustainability of our work. And so much so that we were able to adapt it even during the times for COVID.
Yes.
Go ahead.
To tap onto that, for me, it's about ownership. Like in every conversation with Karen, like the ownership word always came in. And for me, it's like very powerful, because if we don't take ownership of our work, no one else will. Like, I know, like, we need to collaborate, to co-create with these communities, but the reason we are here is because we need to create that spaces for collaboration, for dialogue, for making these things happen. And if we don't take responsibility, no one else will.
So good.
Well, I think for me, the leadership is the respect in the cultural exchange, because if you're working with different group of people have very different contexts, even different ethic, different language, it's very easy for designer or for facilitator to becoming lie to both sides. So I think show the respect and be honest during the whole process is very important leadership for this kind of international culture exchange.
Yeah, and I want to add one more thing I think is really important, is that sometimes you need to just insist what you think is the truth, and just don't give up and just insist what you are trying to do. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. So final words. You know my tradition. I give my final words. So this is your opportunity for final words. You can talk about your future vision around your work, or just any final words that you have. So Danielle, can I start with you, and then just pass the ball, and then we'll turn it back to Mia.
Yeah. So this is kind of a combo of what I was going to say about leadership principles too, but being a single Mormon myself in my 30s, I've been on this journey with them. And so it really took courage and commitment to start the conversation with them. And there's a quote from our design in residence, Sloan Leo, that really helped me find congruence throughout this process. And she said, or they said, at the core of community are shared experiences. They create culture and help to be a beacon for your tribe. And that's exactly what came through in this process, and what I think will sustain the work going forward. Monica, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. For me, as I mentioned before, this is an ongoing process, but I think it was a great start. We learned a lot from our first intervention, and know the improvements we need to make for the next iteration. We will continue to work towards a more equitable and inclusive education for migrant children, because we want social and emotional learning, creative problem solving, and exposure to role models to be accessible to every student. We want these educational tools to be part of the norm and not an extracurricular activity. We want this project to be the seed that will change the educational system for migrant youth forever. Thank you.
Incredible. Who are you passing it to, Monica?
To Kexin.
Thank you. So in the future, I hope the series of workshop I'm creating, and also the card game, will be not activities that just exist in SVA, but also it can be exist in many US universities and help more Chinese international students feel that they can find their own community, that they can get support and help. Yeah. I will pass to Alisha.
Personally, I feel there's a lot of love and a lot of heart gone into this project. And I've always been driven with the idea, with the desire to be able to uplift voices. And by encouraging Yemeni mothers' voices, we envision this project to not only provide them role models, but for them to see themselves as role models for the future generations. And I'm gonna let Elana complete the rest.
Thank you, Alisha. So as Alisha and I were reflecting on this end of this project together, I remembered that a mentor once told us that innovation comes from specificity. And I think the magic of our project has been how it's specifically tailored to the exact needs of this Yemeni community here in New York City. So for now, it was, the project belongs to them, and it was just an honor for Alisha and I to be able to tell their story.
Did everyone?
Well, I guess I'm the last one. Well, I wish that through that project, the
Baitian has a lag. Let's see if
artists in New York, and I hope all people can realize that the importance of the accessibility and communication with each other. I think it's very important for future we stand together. And thank you all.
Thank you all. Well done. Well done.
Yes.
Incredible. Mia?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Karen, for leading this. We just love having you at DSI, and you've been an inspiration to all of us. Congratulations to this panel. As Monica said, this is a great start. This topic is big. It's very big in many ways, and you've crystallized specific problems and contexts and included the people who have been impacted, who are impacted. And it leads to really different outcomes. So letting immigrant women, Asian international students, Chinese artists, LDS young adults, children in Mexico lead their solutions. It's incredible. With capabilities of building trust, to build more ownership, as Monica said, to create more empathy and awareness, as Baitian said, and not giving up because it is not a one and done issue, right, Kexin? And, you know, we really do need to identify the social capital and the community assets so that we can build, you know, these for the long haul. So thank you, Alisha and Elana, for reminding us of that. This is the end of our panels. I think they were incredibly successful. I would like to thank the support of the broader SVA community. They gave us, you know, so much support in getting here. Our family at DSI, our up and coming class of 2021, our incredible staff, Chessa, Indiana, Gail, for making this so seamless. On Monday, we were like, I think we're okay. And that's because there was so much hard work that went into this. Again, our thesis advisors, Mari Nakano, Esther Kang, Jeff Franklin, Kara Meyer, Allison Cornyn, Natalia Radewal, Archie Lee Coates IV, and Sloan Leo, and all of our faculty. Every one of our faculty has worked so hard to, you know, get these students learning what they need to know. I'm so confident that they are ready to get to the world. I think the Creative Reaction Lab, Razmia Kamrani Fry, the VADE group, Sloan Leo, and Karen Proctor for being our fearless moderators in this new experiment of Thesis. We have a premiere of our Thesis video at 1 p.m. It's on YouTube, and you can access it on our website, dsi.sva.edu, Thesis 2020 Live. So you can see their work in all of its glory, hear from the Thesis advisors, and just see everything. We'll be doing a celebration. So I'm proud to announce the graduating class of Design for Social Innovation 2020. Go forward, act, lead this, and thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Woo.
We're done.
You're done.
Congratulations.
Well done.
Woo! Everyone who's on the
Thanks, Tarriba.
all of our class, I
Thank
know.
you. Thank everybody.
Thank you.